Hello and welcome to National Focus. I am Octavia Prosper. In the headlines, government builds resilient homes at Joe Burton in Wesley. Dominica's economy expected to grow over 4%. And flow testing begins on geothermal production wells. The details of the headline stories and more when we return. Welcome back. Geothermal development in Dominica has reached a new milestone with the commencement of flow testing on the second production well at Loda on Thursday, April 6th. Testing of the production well is an important step in the geothermal development project as it will determine the energy potential of the well or how much electricity can be generated. Mr. Dalton Elwa is the project support engineer mechanical for the Dominica Geothermal Development Company.
This is very important because when we are developing the geothermal power plant, we need to know the capacity of that plant. We need to know the capacity of the well so we can design the plant. But more than just that, the flow test also takes a few measurements such as fluid chemistry, the gas content of the fluids, and these things are important in helping to design your power plant. In doing the flow test, we had to take certain precautions, mostly for health and safety. And we started with engaging the community by sensitizing them on the risks of the flow test. We had to bleed off a gas cap that was in the well.
Mr. Elwa reports that all the necessary precautions associated with the flow test were observed.
Before flowing the well, there's a layer of gas on top of the well that has to be bled off. And in doing that, we had to protect the community. So we engaged emergency services. We had the Red Cross, we had the fire service, the police, the environmental health, and we also did our own monitoring with our gas equipment. When we opened the well, which we started at 6 a.m. this morning, we had a buffer zone which we did not allow anyone to come into. And once we opened that section, we monitored the levels and whether there was any danger to the community. The good news is within 200 meters or so of the well, there was no detection of any gases. Once that first gas cap was bled off, we saw that the steam was coming from the well like you see behind me. And at that stage, the well is pretty safe. The hazards to the community is nothing. So we can proceed, and we're going to be testing the well for the next 4 weeks.
Meanwhile, drilling of the reinjection well is nearing completion. Drilling commenced early last month and is expected to wrap up before the end of next week. The Dominican economy is projected to see growth over 4% in 2023 to 2024. This as a team from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, led by Ms. Joanna Piera, visited Roseau and held discussions on the 2023 article for consultation with Dominican authorities from March 20 to 31. At the end of this consultation, the IMF team released 12 main conclusions and recommendations resulting from these discussions. One of these conclusions is that the Dominican economy is expanding strongly, but faces challenges due to global inflation shocks. The report stated that although severely affected by the pandemic, the real GDP growth is estimated to have reached 6.9% in 2021 and 5.7% in 2022. This growth is driven by construction of climate, resilient infrastructure, a rebound in tourism since the full lifting of COVID-related restrictions in April 2022, and a substantial rise in agricultural output. The report also states that the economic outlook for Dominica is positive. This is as a result of a full recovery in tourism, the implementation of public investment plans, and prudent fiscal management. Growth is expected to stay above 4.5% in 2023 to 24 as tourism returns to pre-COVID levels and the construction of the new international airport and geothermal power plant take hold. Inflation is projected to recede to 6.3% in 2023 and to continue falling afterwards along with international trends. The current account deficit is expected to gradually narrow over the medium term, while public debt is set to decline in coming years. Other recommendations mentioned in the report are the strengthening of social protection systems, modernizing supervisory frameworks to preserve financial stability, modernization of the economy and strengthening economic resilience, and advancing institutional reforms to mitigate risk and support economic policy making. The full report can be found on imf.org. Residents of Wesley continue to benefit from government's rollout of plans for an international airport. Julian Morris reports.
Speaking at a recent media tour of the project in Wesley, Prime Minister the Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit pointed to access to land for farmers as among the economic spin-offs of plans for an international airport. The Prime Minister says providing medium-term and long-term leases to residents based on their requests and need is in an effort to further empower them.
In respect to agriculture, we have started and we're continuing to sign leases, to approve leases for farmers in the West area. And when you have a lease, it gives you a certain legal cover and legal basis of engaging yourself and engaging the financial institutions. And then you can take the lease to the credit union, to the bank, and be able to get a loan on that basis because you have a legal right to plant and to grow food on those lands and be recognized legally. And so all of these things are efforts to empower people.
Beginning his media tour of the airport development project at the housing development at Joe Burton, the Prime Minister expressed satisfaction with the resilience of the homes.
The roof, and this is why these homes are a bit more expensive than the ordinary construction. They're all concrete roofs. And we still placed the alu-zinc over it. So we have a double roof, and the alu-zinc was placed with the same standards that you would have done if it was just a wooden roof with galvanized. So you have a concrete roof, and then to improve the aesthetics and so forth, we added this additional roof, which is a double cost. But we believe that in the long term, this is better for the residents in terms of hurricanes and storms and so forth, that there's no fear of the roof going. So even if the galvanized were to go, and I don't think it will go because of the number of screws that we have and the closeness of the 2x4 and the 2x6 during the construction, I don't think the roofs will go. But in the event that it does, the people will stay in their homes and stay comfortably.
The Prime Minister has praised residents affected by the airport project for their cooperation.
I must say, overall, we've gotten some great cooperation and collaboration from those affected by the construction of the airport, in terms of the farmers, in terms of the landowners, the property owners, because to tell somebody to get out of your house and the person has been living there for the last 50, 60 years, it's a difficult proposition. But we're very grateful to all of them, and they've really, in a self, surprised all of us in the government, because we thought that was going to be our biggest challenge of getting the landowners to give up, and it was such a smooth process. And so we're very grateful to them, and I'm happy that they're happy now with the end product. And I think it's still a new development. So, but once it gets settled, the soil gets settled there, and people start acclimatizing themselves to the environment and so forth. You come back here in a year's time, it will look like a very mature community with the plants and vegetation and so forth. But I'm very happy for what we've done for them.
The Joe Burton homes cost roughly $354,000 each. The Prime Minister explained the reasons for the delay in settling residents for the acquired properties. Government acquired over 500 acres of land to facilitate the construction of the international airport.
In respect to the land, as you know, the compensatory process can be a very tedious one, and because it's a legal issue, one has to ensure that all of the I's are dotted and all of the T's are crossed. So sometimes we've had monies waiting in the treasury for months for people to pick up because they couldn't find the original title. You understand? There's some lands sometimes that are tied with banks. I was giving you an overall picture of some of the delays we have in the payments. Sometimes you have lands that are encumbered. You have lands that are that the family left without a will, and the number of families involved. You understand? And there are some properties that were acquired later than others because we had to acquire additional lands to extend the runway to the 2,850 meters length, moving away from the 2,500 meters length that we originally envisaged. So we build an airport for the next 150 years rather than the next 100 years. I believe, all things considered, once you can get all of the legal documentation in place, I don't see us not settling within the next 2 months.
He says the delays are mainly due to the legal processes involved and not the government's inability to pay.
We have the monies to pay. It's just for make sure that we go through the process in a very detailed way. Because the Treasury, even if the Ministry of Finance says pay, the Treasury will not pay until it ensures that all of the documents are in place. And even when all of this have to go to the President, because the President ultimately is the one under the Constitution who is charged with the final approval for the sale and lease of state lands and acquisitions and all these things. So the money to pay is there. It's a matter of us going through a voluminous amount of legal documentation. As a matter of fact, we had to assign a lawyer in the agent's office and attorney in the agent's office to give day-to-day attention to that process because it's a very, very detailed. I'm even more anxious than you, who have been directly affected, because I hold ultimate responsibility to ensure that everybody gets their fair compensation for their lands.
Over 80% of landowners affected by the land acquisition for the airport development project have been compensated. Julian Morris for the Government Information Service.
4 women have been elected as part of the newly formed village council who will serve the residents of Tatan, Tukari, Savanpai, Gillette, Mona Louis, and Cottage. This as the general village council election was held on Monday, April 3, 2023. Vernon Judd Baptist topped the results with 81 votes, followed by Romelia Romaine Burton with 71 votes. Lucina Saint-Jean received 65 votes, while Sandra Andre and Catherine Joseph received a total of 63 votes each. First-time contender Miss Lucina Saint-Jean, who emerged in the top 3, expressed her gratitude to everyone who lent their support.
I'm very excited. I got 50 votes. The people turned out in large numbers. And I would also like to say thank you to all those who come out and vote, not just for me, but for the different candidates. Everybody did well, I must say. And the turnout, I must say, I'm happy. Because, from going home to home, everybody's saying that, they, nothing to vote in, and they still came out in large numbers than we expected. So I just want to say, thank you to them.
Presiding officer of the Tatan, Tukari, Savanpai, and Cottage Village Council election, Elizabeth St. John, believes individuals should always exercise their right to vote.
I believe that it's our given right to take part in those sort of elections, because that's where you have a voice. You can give your opinion, you can say what you like, what you dislike, and you can just generally stand for your community, because our community really need good leadership.
The other candidates who contested the election are Dennis Bell, Roseanne Mason, Florita Anita Joseph, Bruno Lamoff, Bertha Daniel, Carol John Baptist, Carol Baron, and Shakima Augustine. You're watching the National Focus. More when we return. Welcome back. The 12th edition of the anticipated Jazz and Creole Festival is less than 1 month away. Preparations have begun as the first press briefing was held April 4, 2023, to update the public on activities leading up to the festival. Jazz and Creole has always been known as a marketable event to welcome patrons to Dominica from across the world, more specifically the French territories. It is a family-oriented event with a fusion of jazz and Creole music, exquisite foods, and culture. This event was conceptualized in 2010 and is hosted annually except in 2020 and 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
This year's lineup includes Black Violin of Fort Lauderdale, Island Jazz Collective, Haitian American singer Felicia Ross, and Dominica's local bands, Signal and Swinging Stars. Dominica's Jazz and Creole is well known as a family-oriented event. Unfortunately, due to the COVID outbreak last year, the Kids Zone was eliminated from the event. However, I am pleased to announce that this year, the Kids Zone will be back.
Destination Marketing Manager Ms. Kimberly King called on jazz and festival lovers abroad to begin preparations for travel to Dominica.
Persons can book their travel via Caribbean Airlines and fly direct from Barbados to Dominica on Mondays, fly direct from Port of Spain to Dominica on Thursdays just in time for the event. Inter-Caribbean has also expanded its service to Dominica, and persons from hubs in St. Lucia and Barbados can fly directly or with one stop into Dominica. Persons can also connect from the United States and Canada via American Airlines, JetBlue, United Airlines, Air Canada, or WestJet to and from Dominica in Barbados.
Festival packages will be made available to anyone wishing to experience all the activities leading up to the main stage event at the Fort Shirley on April 30th.
That include accommodation, jazz tickets, and other experiences such as tours in Portsmouth. You can access this via www.dominicafestivals.com, jazz, and click where to stay. I repeat that, www.dominicafestivals.com, hit the jazz tab, and click where to stay for this festival package. Furthermore, collectively, we agreed to further develop the Dominican youth in jazz, and marketing has opted to host a social media competition called the Jazz and Creole #Rising Star, where the lucky winner will be given the opportunity to perform live at Jazz and Creole.
Jazz and Creole returned in 2022 and is expected to be even bigger this year. The concept of the celebration this year is Welcome to Portsmouth, the land of jazz and Creole. Government continues to pave the way for youth in Dominica with investments being made in housing, sports, tourism, education, and agriculture. The recent launch of the National Youth in Agriculture program is another investment in the future of youth development. Minister for Housing and Urban Development, Honorable Melissa Poppon-Skerritt, says it is time for youth to be encouraged as major investments are being made for their advancement.
We have always engaged with youth and formulated policy to help them to achieve their hopes and their dreams. We have made the right decisions for our young population in education through the National Employment Program, the Dominica Youth Business Trust, the countless other initiatives, and now through the National Youth in Agriculture Program. With this venture, we will leverage the talents and the skills of our young to establish model agricultural enterprises with the financial and the technical support of the Ministry of Agriculture.
As part of the implementation of the Youth in Agriculture program, the Ministry of Agriculture has developed a workable approach that involves a national directory of young farmers, fishers, and agro-processors. Minister Poppon-Skerritt highlighted other approaches to be adopted.
A facility with the provision to counterpart financing, grant funding, or credit for budding agri-enterprises, the establishment of Youth in the Agriculture Desk, and the reactivation of the National Association of Youth in Agriculture. These approaches have all met with the approval of the Cabinet in the hope that youth can drive national efforts to reduce imports and increase exports of Dominican produce, and to offer innovative strategies and solutions for the strengthening of the sector towards sustainable development. To meet our objectives, we are open to the inclusion of young farmers in program design, as well as the development of national policy and strategy.
The Minister for Housing is hopeful that the implementation of this new program will help to erase the stigma associated with agriculture.
That it is for the poor, country, rural folks. Those of you with experience in farming know that it is an honorable profession that feeds, educates, and has the potential to enrich families. Farm work also influences a strong, enduring work ethic, which we must now pass on to succeeding generations. We must also know that agriculture can be a means to earn substantial income if approached with diligence, patience, and a willingness to get out of our comfort zones and to get our hands dirty. We want our young people to see agriculture as a lifestyle and a business that requires focus and hard work to realize returns.
Government believes Dominica's social stability and the ability to retain the youth as nation builders rest in the investment of citizen resilience and well-being. Prime Minister Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit believes his government has been responsible with its expenditure. Though government has suffered significant loss from the effects of climate change and external shocks, government has prioritized building resilience in various sectors to include housing, agriculture, public infrastructure, and health, all of which is in an effort to become the world's first climate resilient nation.
The reality is that our countries face the burden of high debt, primarily due to the cycle of continuously responding to climate-related disaster events and external economic disruptions over which we have little control. If you look at our debt profile, you will recognize that 98% of our borrowing were to respond to natural disasters and external shocks. 98%. We have been a responsible government, and we needed to do what we had to do to provide for our families and our people after natural disasters and external shocks.
Prime Minister Skerrit says had it not been for the occurrence of natural disasters and other external shocks, government would have achieved a debt of GDP ratio of below 40%.
We were on our march to achieving this, but for the natural disasters. Over the past 3 years, our recovery efforts and development prospects were hampered by a global pandemic, which severely impacted our people's health and livelihoods. It compromised our food systems, employment prospects, and economic growth outlook. We, like many other Caribbean states, suffered significant loss of tourism revenue and were forced to redirect finances to the management of the health crisis. This meant reduced capacity to invest in infrastructure, agriculture, education, and social safety net programs. The ongoing Russia-Ukraine war continues to pose a threat to the economic fortunes of our small countries.
These challenges imposed on the region have resulted in urgent responses from government and its development partners.
No longer can we afford to pay lip service to the issues of climate change or the restrictive access to development financing. We have country-specific work plans which will help us to build resilience to climate change, promote the well-being of all our citizens, and put us on the path to economic growth and development. Today's gathering is cause for optimism as we devise ways to tackle our common problems together. What recommendations can you make, acting individually and jointly, to secure assistance to countries like Dominica with greater speed and at the levels needed to combat the effects of natural disasters and address the fallout from frequent economic shocks?
Prime Minister Skerrit called on financial institutions to improve access to external financial support in order to address the most pressing social and economic challenges for the Small Island Developing States, SIDS.
The funds are available in foreign banks and institutions for drawdown, but the existing structures can be complex and very inefficient. It means that the assistance we do receive is not always timely and not always sufficient in effecting wide-ranging positive change. The rules, I would say, my dear friends, have been suspended to support Ukraine, but they were not suspended for Dominica when the war created by the climate change was unleashed upon us in Dominica. And we agree and support the suspending of the rules for Ukraine because they need the support. All we're saying is that the rules can be changed, and we're urging the development partners to change the rules so that small island states like ours can have equal access, quicker access.
45 years after he designed Dominica's national flag, Dominicans from all walks of life gathered to bid farewell to distinguished playwright, artist, and cultural administrator, Dr. Alwyn Anthony Booley. The government of Dominica accorded the late cultural icon an official funeral, which took place on April 5, 2023 at the St. George's Hall. His Excellency Charles Salvre and the Honorable Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit and his cabinet were among the dignitaries in attendance. In his homily, Monsignor William John Lewis thanked the Booley family for sharing the late Dr. Booley with the rest of Dominica. He pointed out that in one sense, Dr. Booley belonged to the people of Dominica as well.
Anita, thank you for being so gracious in understanding that your dear husband belonged to us as well. We could never love him as you love him, but you allowed us to celebrate him, his talents, his contributions to our country and to the world, his achievements. We, all of Dominica, thank you for being the woman at the side of this extraordinary human being. Sade and Brent, you called him Dad, your father. Your remembrances of him are very personal. Thank you for allowing us to embrace your dad as our father too, the father of this nation.
Monsignor John Lewis drew attention to the inherent desire within every man to aspire to greatness as Dr. Alwyn Booley inspired others to do by his example.
There is something in the human psyche that engenders an incessant craze for greatness, an insatiable desire for glory. The human heart craves immortalization. Artists and businessmen, choreographers and dictators, engineers and fashion designers, geologists, humanitarians, intellectuals, journalists, kings, lawmakers and musicians, nanotechnologists, orthodontists, statesmen, politicians, queens, researchers, teachers, upholsterers, volcanologists, writers, xylophonists, youth leaders, and zoologists, all regardless of our profession, yearn for greatness. And some achieve greatness through lawful and admirable means, through their intellectual brilliance, their strength of character. Others, in their craving for greatness, connive, abuse their power and authority. Some even engage in occult and demonic activity. Jesus, when he spoke to his disciples, while they were arguing about who was the greatest, reminded them that the greatest among them should be their servant. He reminded them that great men make their authority felt, but that should not be among them. He equated greatness with service. Alwyn Booley was a great man.
Monsignor John Lewis reflected on the reality of what's important in terms of leaving a legacy.
So what will matter? How will the value of your days be measured? What will matter is not what you bought, but what you built. Not what you got, but what you gave. What will matter is not your success, but your significance. What will matter is not what you learned, but what you taught. What will matter is every act of integrity, compassion, courage, or sacrifice that enriched, empowered, or encouraged others to emulate your example. What will matter is not your competence, but your character. What will matter is not how many people you knew, but how many will feel a lasting loss when you're gone.
And that's all for this edition of National Focus. Be sure to follow GIS Dominica on Facebook, YouTube, and on Twitter. You can also drop us an email at gis@dominica.gov.dm. From all of us here on the GIS News production team, I am Octavia Prosper. Thanks for watching and stay safe.